The message came on a cold morning at Terran Command Headquarters. Admiral Elena Corsov stood in the center of the communications bay as the holographic screen shimmered to life. A tall, violet-skinned being appeared, for eyes blinking in precise rhythm, his tone heavy with centuries of dominance. "I am High Executive Ralthan of the Calraian Galactic Empire. By Imperial Decree 7743, the 12 star systems you humans call your border worlds are now under Imperial expansion. You have 30 standard days to withdraw every human presence. Refusal will result in forced integration." The image vanished. Silence filled the room, the kind of silence that follows when history itself changes course. Technicians exchanged worried glances. Commander James Park, Elena's second-in-command, finally broke it. "Admiral, your orders?" Elena turned toward the great viewport overlooking Earth, blue and peaceful below. People down there were going about ordinary lives, unaware that an empire spanning thousands of worlds had just demanded they abandon their homes. She spoke quietly. "Call an emergency session with the Colonial Council and the Defense Committee. And ready the Third Fleet. We're going to the border." Park hesitated. "Admiral, the Third Fleet is our newest dreadnought and 40 support ships. If we move them now, the Calraians might see it as provocation." "They already made their move," Elena replied, her eyes cold as steel. "They think we're insignificant. Let's show them otherwise." The Council of Governors. The next morning, 12 holograms shimmered into being around the conference table, governors from the border colonies, faces tight with fear and anger. Governor Ramirez of Theta 7 spoke first. "They can't just take our worlds. My people have lived there for 70 years. We built those cities." Ambassador Schuyler, the Federation observer, shook her silver-skinned head. "The Empire doesn't care who was there first. They've done this dozens of times. Species either flee or submit. No one resists." Governor Chen asked the question everyone feared. "And if we refuse?" "Then you share the fate of the Vorlothi," Schuyler answered quietly. Their home world was shattered, 3 billion dead. The room fell silent until Governor Ramirez turned to Elena. "What does Terran Command recommend?" Elena stood. She had spent the night poring over reports and probabilities, all of them grim. The Empire had 10,000 years of warfare behind it, humanity had 200. The math said surrender. But history said something else. "We fight," Elena said simply. Outrage exploded, voices overlapping in disbelief. "You can't be serious. They'll destroy us." Elena waited for the noise to fade. "Maybe they will," she admitted, "but they haven't fought a real war in 3 millennia. Every species they met either ran or surrendered. They don't know what to do with an enemy that refuses to yield." The governors exchanged uncertain glances. 8 voted for resistance. 4 wanted negotiation. 8 was enough. The borderline. 3 days later, the dreadnought Indomitable led the Third Fleet into the border region. 40 ships formed around her, cruisers, destroyers, carriers humming with power. They emerged beside the massive border beacon marking the edge of human space. "Incoming transmission," the comm officer said. "Put it through," Elena ordered. High Executive Ralthan's 4 eyes narrowed at the sight of her uniform. "You are making a grave mistake, human. Leave now or be eradicated." Elena stepped closer to the camera, letting the Empire see her face, calm, unflinching. "You demanded we abandon our colonies. We refuse. Any attempt to cross this line will be treated as an act of war. This is your only warning." She ended the call before he could reply. Park exhaled slowly. "Admiral, they've never been defied before. They'll come for us." "Let them," Elena said. "The line holds here." Around them, drones deployed, shields flared to life, and the first true human battle line in galactic history formed. The first clash, Theta 7. 29 days passed. On the 30th, sensors erupted with red contacts, 300 Calraian warships emerging near Theta 7. On the small destroyer Defiant, Captain Marcus Webb watched the enemy fill his tactical screen, a crimson storm advancing on his lone ship. "We're being hailed," the comm officer said. "Put it through." A scar-marked alien appeared, War Leader Krathna. "Human vessel, surrender immediately. You will be processed. Resistance is futile." Webb met the alien's gaze. "You're trespassing in Terran space. This is your only warning. Turn back." Krathna actually laughed. "One tiny ship threatens the Empire? You humans are amusing." "Not amusing," Webb replied. "Just human." He cut the channel. Defiance. The Defiant opened fire. Railguns thundered, not elegant beams of energy, but raw kinetic violence. 30 rounds a second, each slug a fist-sized projectile of depleted uranium moving at 3% the speed of light. Calraian shields, tuned for plasma and particle weapons, never stood a chance. 6 enemy ships vanished in the first volley. 4 more went dark, venting debris. The Empire's formation faltered. "Evasive pattern Delta," Webb ordered. The destroyer twisted away, smaller and faster than anything the Calraians could target accurately. Another burst, another dozen ships crippled. For the first time in 10,000 years, an Imperial fleet hesitated. Then came the dreadnoughts, colossal vessels capable of annihilating planets. "Massive energy spikes," the sensor officer warned. "They're charging their main weapons." "Time to leave," Webb said calmly. "Navigation, execute microjump." The Defiant blinked out of existence moments before the combined blast obliterated its former position. The trap. In the chaos, the Calraian commander demanded pursuit. "Follow them. All vessels, advance." But as they moved, new contacts appeared, hundreds. The human Third Fleet uncloaked, surrounding them in a vast sphere. From the Indomitable, Elena's voice rang clear. "All ships, weapons free. Execute attack pattern Sigma." The void lit up with streaks of fire. Human cruisers unleashed missile swarms, destroyers struck from the flanks with railgun fire. Even damaged ships turned themselves into weapons, ramming the enemy when out of ammunition. After 2 relentless hours, the Calraian formation shattered. 100 ships fled into faster-than-light space, less than half their original number. War Leader Krathna, beaten and bloodied, recorded a final transmission before retreat. "The humans fight like nothing we have seen. They do not fear death. Their weapons are crude, yet devastating. I recommend we reconsider this war." He sent it knowing it might cost him his life, because in the Calraian Empire, defeat was unforgivable. Aftermath. On the bridge of the Indomitable, the surviving crew cheered. They had achieved the impossible, humanity's first victory against the oldest power in the galaxy. But Admiral Corsov didn't celebrate. "They'll be back," she said quietly to Commander Park. "And next time, they won't underestimate us. Tell command to prepare. Every ship, every weapon, every soldier, we'll need them all." Beyond the viewport, wreckage drifted like metallic ghosts, silent monuments to both courage and loss. The border was drawn, and humanity had made its choice. The line would hold. When the report arrived at Terran Command, the numbers felt like an accusation. 5,000 Calraian vessels, every available capital ship and support fleet the Empire could muster, were converging. They were not coming to test a border. They were coming to erase it. Admiral Elena Corsov folded her hands on the console and let the gravity of it sink in. The fleet at the border had won a battle, but not the war. Across the human systems, civil life had already been reshaped into industry for defense, shipyards running around the clock, mines redirected to war production, research facilities retooled to build weapons nobody had expected to need. Volunteers converted cargo haulers into missile platforms, farmers and engineers learned how to service automated defense arrays. Humanity had turned an entire civilization into an arsenal. "Tell me our best-case scenario," General Marcus Hayes asked bluntly in the war room. He represented the grim math the way a physician might speak of a terminal illness, clinically and without hope. We can't beat them in a straight engagement, Elena replied. Not with what we have now. But we can make this war so costly that their leadership will reconsider whether conquest is worth the price. Make every approach a tomb, make their advance a series of funerals. She ordered the construction of layered defenses, kilometer-deep minefields, swarms of automated rail platforms hidden in asteroid belts, clouds of microsatellites loaded with mass projectiles, and decoy fields that would lure enemy formation into killing zones. They weaponized logistics, entire trade lanes became lethal gauntlets. Cavaliers from the shipyards whispered about Project Prometheus in hushed, reverent tones, the program that could turn the physics of motion itself into a doomsday device. As the Empire assembled its first true siege fleet, human intelligence tracked staging points and supply lines. The Calraians were methodical. They would hit in waves, the outer colonies first, then border beacons, then, if they succeeded, Earth. The plan was grotesquely efficient. The humans made it uglier. The first wave, 2,000 ships, arrived at Theta 7 with arrogant confidence. Many of the vessels were old, meant only to show overwhelming numbers. They expected the defenses to crumble quickly. Instead, crews on orbital platforms detonated triggers across the system, fields of fusion-driven lasers folded out from stealth caches, lattice defenses severed shielding apertures, and mass drivers fired slugs that behaved like sudden meteors. The sky around Theta 7 became a shredding storm. Hundreds of Imperial ships died in the initial moments. War leader Krathna, who had returned with a vengeance, found his fleet shredded by a combination of crude brutality and improvisation, humanity's best tools. Railgun platforms, once dismissed as primitive, punched holes through armor with kinetic ferocity. Asteroid devices, rocks fitted with propulsion and guidance, slammed into formations and created cascading collisions. Strike groups of small, fast destroyers performed hit-and-run attacks that turned the Calraian flanks into chaos. News feeds across human space carried the same stunned refrain, the Empire hadn't planned for this. They had never fought an adversary that willingly accepted casualty after casualty to keep fighting. The Calraians adapted, as empires do, but each adaptation stumbled into a different human trap. When they tried sending in expendable drones to clear minefields, those drones were looped into orbital currents and turned into bludgeoning swarms. When they moved heavy cruisers back for long-range bombardment, human fighters and missile volleys found and annihilated their support craft. The Mars volunteers taught the galaxy a lesson about grief and devotion. Hundreds of civilian vessels, refitted mining ships and freighters, were used as one-way weapons. Pilots from the Red Colony rode them inward in waves, detonating spatial distortions that shredded capital ships and took the volunteers with them. The tactic bled the Empire's numbers horribly and left humanity's own conscience bloodied. The volunteers' sacrifice was not anonymous. Memorials sprouted on every moon and station that had lost children to the desperate gambit. By the time the second wave reached the outer systems, the Calraians had lost nearly half their initial force. They learned to send expendables, to probe, to avoid the obvious traps, but every success demanded weeks of careful clearing. Every cleared channel required costs the Empire had not budgeted. The human populace was willing to pay those costs in lives and industry. It had become a wartime economy that refused to stop. The final approach, the thrust for Earth, came with the full weight of Imperial wrath, nearly 2,000 ships, dreadnoughts that had never known defeat. They expected a quick collapse once they breached the outer defenses. Instead, they found a planet reshaped into weaponry. Satellites turned into mass arrays, orbital railguns leveraged planetary rotation to hurl projectiles at impossible speeds, and every civilian structure that could house a launcher had been converted. For many in the Empire, it appeared that the entire human race had become a single cohesive battle machine. On the third day of the Battle of Gateway Station, the sky above Earth was a violent lattice of fire. Human orbital platforms, guerrilla strike squadrons, and rerouted mining rigs combined to exhaust and then crush segments of the invading armada. Dreadnoughts that thought themselves unstoppable were ripped apart when tungsten rods moving at relativistic fractions impacted with concentrated, volcano-like fury. Project Prometheus, the culmination of frantic, brilliant engineering, had unleashed a kinetic weapon that could make a capital ship vanish in a shock of blinding light and cascading failure. The cost of such a strike was incalculable and terrifying. Its deployment changed everything. When the Imperial Glory, the flagship that had embodied 10,000 years of unbroken conquest, was struck dead by a Prometheus shot, something fundamental in the Calraian heart snapped. Orders to withdraw rippled through the fleet. Ships that had spearheaded centuries of victories turned and fled, leaving wreckage and smoke behind. Terran Command counted its losses like a tally of saints martyred. 60 ships were gone, scores more shattered. Millions of lives across colonies and orbital habitats had been scarred or lost. But the line held. Months after the decisive engagements, silence where the Empire's propaganda had once been thunderous replaced shocked, angry deliberation in the Grand Chamber on the Calraian throne world. High Executive Run lay dead, the subject of a sudden, terrible collapse. His passing reshaped the politics of revenge and caution. The Council of Dominance, brittle and humiliated, fractured into factions. Some called for annihilation despite the cost, others advocated a retreat and reevaluation. In the end, exhaustion and fear of further losses won. Envoys were dispatched. When the Imperial delegation arrived on Earth for negotiations, the sight of their armor and scars, the visible mark of Empire humbled, stunned lesser species into wonder. Ambassador Schuyler, who had attended as observer, watched the treaty signing with a mixture of professional detachment and raw awe. Humanity demanded recognition, a formal treaty acknowledging Terran sovereignty over the border systems, reparations for the damage and lives lost, and an ironclad pledge that Imperial fleets would never again cross recognized human territory. They called it the Treaty of Terror, a name born of the fear the Empire had long sown now turned inward upon its conquerors. The Calraians agreed because they had to. Their doctrine had not accounted for a species that would rather perish than bow. The document reshaped galactic politics. For the first time in millennia, an outwardly ascending empire admitted limits. In the aftermath, human society braced for the slow, grinding cost of recovery. Economies had been diverted to war production for months. Colonies that survived were scarred and must be rebuilt from ash and metal. Memorials proliferated, rows of names etched across monuments under the phrase that had become a creed, "The line holds." At Gateway Station, a simple plaque listed the ships and the souls who died defending the Earth, including Marcus Webb and the Mars Volunteers, each name followed by a small, carved emblem, a line drawn and held. Admiral Elena Corsov, promoted to Supreme Commander, refused adulation and sought lessons. She ordered permanent defenses, rigorous intelligence reforms, and diplomatic initiatives meant to prevent future surprise. She taught the galaxy a new calculus. Technological superiority and ancient tradition could inspire fear, but underestimating the will to fight made myths brittle. Other species watched and learned, some with newfound respect, others with a wary discomfort. Empires everywhere recalculated the cost of conquest. Even as Terran shipyards shifted back to peacetime production, the world never again treated borders as mere lines on a map. They were symbols, reminders, and redoubts. They were places humans would hold until the last breath. When the history books were written, later generations would debate the ethics of the tactics, the price of victory, and the morality of weapons that changed the rules of engagement. For the people who had stood beneath the border beacons, who had fired the railguns and buried their dead, the answer was simpler and harsher. Survival had a cost, but some things cost more than life without home and memory. The line held, and in holding, it reshaped the galaxy's future.